The cobblestones beneath your boots are uneven, worn smooth by centuries of processions, conquests, and the daily shuffle of life that has never ceased since the Caesars themselves walked these very streets. It is 1880, and Rome breathes with a peculiar duality, a city caught between the ghosts of empire and the anxious heartbeat of a newborn nation. The air carries the scent of roasting chestnuts mingling with the acrid tang of coal smoke, drifting from the workshops that have begun to crowd the districts beyond the ancient walls. You hear the clatter of a carriage, its iron-rimmed wheels striking stone with a rhythm that echoes off palazzo facades streaked with ochre and sienna, their shutters half closed against the midday sun that hammers down with the same relentless intensity it has unleashed upon this landscape for millennia. This is not the Rome of postcards or romantic fantasies. This is the Rome of 1880, a metropolis of contradictions where marble columns stand sentinel over open sewers, where cardinals in crimson silk pass beggars wrapped in rags so threadbare they might disintegrate at a touch, where the very ground beneath your feet conceals layers of history so dense that every foundation dug for a new building risks unearthing a forgotten temple, a discarded statue, a mosaic that has not seen sunlight in 1,500 years. The unification of Italy is barely a decade old, and Rome, seized from papal control in 1870, is a capital struggling to define itself. The Pope remains a self-imposed prisoner within the Vatican, refusing to acknowledge the legitimacy of the Italian state, and this bitter standoff casts a shadow over the entire city. The streets are filled with a new class of bureaucrats, politicians, and speculators who have descended upon Rome with the appetite of locusts, buying up land, demolishing medieval neighborhoods, and erecting grandiose ministries and apartments in a frenzy of construction that some celebrate as progress and others denounce as vandalism. The population has swelled from less than 200,000 souls to nearly 300,000 in just 10 years, and the city's ancient infrastructure groans under the strain. There are no proper sewage systems in most districts, and the Tiber, that storied river which once carried the trade of an empire, now functions as little more than an open sewer, its banks lined with slaughterhouses and tanneries that dump their waste directly into the sluggish brown water. When the summer heat intensifies, the stench becomes unbearable, and those who can afford it flee to the hills, leaving the poor to endure the miasma and the diseases it brings: cholera, typhoid, malaria carried by mosquitoes that breed in the stagnant marshes surrounding the city. Yet amid this chaos, there exists a beauty so profound it can stop you in your tracks. You round a corner and suddenly the Pantheon looms before you, its massive dome impossibly perfect, the oculus at its apex open to the sky, allowing a single shaft of sunlight to slice through the gloom of the interior and illuminate the marble floor with a precision that seems almost divine. Inside, the temperature drops, and the noise of the city fades to a whisper. You stand in a space that has remained virtually unchanged for 18 centuries, and for a moment, the boundary between past and present dissolves entirely. This is the paradox of Rome in 1880. It is simultaneously a construction site and a museum, a place where the future is being violently imposed upon the past, yet where the past refuses to yield, asserting its presence in every crumbling arch, every weathered inscription, every fountain that still flows with water, carried by aqueducts built before the birth of Christ. The social structure of the city is rigidly stratified. At the top are the black nobility, those aristocratic families who have sided with the Pope against the new Italian state, retreating into their palaces and closing their doors to the upstart politicians and industrialists who now hold power. They maintain their own courts, their own rituals, moving through the city like ghosts of a vanished order, attending mass in private chapels, dining on silver plate while their estates in the countryside are slowly sold off to pay mounting debts. Below them are the white nobility, families who have chosen to collaborate with the new regime, accepting positions in the government, marrying their daughters to wealthy merchants and bankers, pragmatists who understand that the world has changed and that survival requires adaptation. Then come the bourgeoisie, the lawyers and doctors and engineers who have flooded into Rome to build the new Italy, men in frock coats and top hats who dine in the fashionable restaurants that have begun to appear along the Via Veneto, who attend the opera at the Teatro Costanzi, who debate politics in the cafes where the air is thick with cigar smoke and revolutionary fervor. And finally, at the bottom, the vast underclass. The laborers who dig the foundations for the new buildings, the washerwomen who scrub laundry in the Tiber, the street vendors who hawk roasted artichokes and slices of watermelon, the beggars who cluster on the steps of every church, the prostitutes who work the alleys near the barracks where soldiers are garrisoned to maintain order in a city that still feels more occupied than liberated. The rhythm of life is dictated by the bells. Every hour, every quarter hour, the churches ring out, a cacophony of bronze that cascades across the rooftops, each campanile competing with its neighbors in a symphony that has no conductor and no end. The faithful still observe the old traditions: Mass at dawn, the Angelus at noon and sunset, the endless processions that wind through the streets on saints' days, carrying relics and banners embroidered with gold thread, accompanied by chanting that rises and falls like the tide. But there is also a new sound now: the mechanical clang of industry, the hiss of steam engines, the rattle of printing presses churning out newspapers filled with scandals and manifestos, the hammering of construction that begins before sunrise and continues until dark. Rome is becoming a city of noise, and those who remember the quieter days before unification speak of it with a mixture of nostalgia and resignation, understanding that this transformation, however violent, is irreversible. To walk through the Trastevere district in 1880 is to step into a world that has resisted change with stubborn tenacity. Here the streets are narrow, almost impassable, twisting back upon themselves in a labyrinth that follows no logic save that of medieval necessity. The buildings lean toward one another, their upper floors nearly touching, blocking out the sun and creating a perpetual twilight even at midday. Laundry hangs from every window, bright splashes of color against the gray stone, and the air is filled with the smell of cooking: garlic and tomatoes, olive oil and rosemary, the simple cuisine of the Roman poor that will one day conquer the world, but in 1880 is still considered rustic, unsophisticated, fit only for those who cannot afford the elaborate French-influenced dishes served in the homes of the wealthy. The people here speak in the thick Roman dialect, a language that bears only a passing resemblance to the Tuscan Italian that is being imposed as the national standard, and they regard outsiders with suspicion, protecting their own, settling disputes among themselves without recourse to the authorities they do not trust. The Forum, once the beating heart of the greatest empire the world has ever known, is in 1880 a cow pasture, a campo vaccino where shepherds graze their flocks amid the ruins. Columns lie toppled and half-buried, their capitals carved with acanthus leaves now serving as seats for peasants eating their lunch. The ground level has risen more than 10 meters over the centuries, accumulating layers of rubble and soil, so that what was once street level in ancient times is now far below the surface. Archaeologists have only just begun the work of excavation, and every shovelful of earth reveals fragments of a lost world: pottery shards, coins bearing the profiles of long-dead emperors, bits of mosaic, sections of fresco still vivid with color after 2,000 years in darkness. There is a sense that Rome is built upon itself, that every age simply piles its debris upon the ruins of what came before, and that to dig down is to travel backward through time, layer by layer, until you reach bedrock and the original hills upon which Romulus, if he ever existed, founded his city of refugees and outcasts. The Vatican remains a state within a state, its walls a boundary that Italian soldiers do not cross. Inside, Pope Leo XIII conducts the business of the Church as if nothing has changed, receiving pilgrims from across the Catholic world, issuing encyclicals, maintaining diplomatic relations with nations that still recognize his temporal authority, even as the Italian government insists that such authority no longer exists. The Swiss Guard still stands watch in their Renaissance uniforms, halberds in hand, and the vast bureaucracy of the Church continues to function with the efficiency born of centuries of practice. But there is an atmosphere of siege, a sense that the Church is embattled, that modernity itself is the enemy, that every railway line and telegraph wire represents a threat to eternal truths. The conflict between church and state poisons the atmosphere of the entire city, dividing families, turning neighbors against one another, creating a climate of mutual suspicion that will not be resolved for decades to come. In the salons of the nobility, French is still the language of conversation, and the fashion is for everything Parisian. The latest novels of Zola, the music of Offenbach, the art of the Impressionists that is just beginning to scandalize the academies. The women wear corsets that constrict their waists to impossible dimensions, gowns with bustles and trains that sweep the floor, hats adorned with feathers plucked from exotic birds slaughtered in distant colonies. The men affect a studied boredom, a world weariness that is considered the height of sophistication, discussing politics and art with the detached irony of those who have seen empires rise and fall and understand that all human endeavor is ultimately futile. Yet beneath this surface of refinement, there is desperation, a recognition that their world is ending, that the future belongs to the industrialists and the engineers, the men who build factories and railways, who measure success not in lineage and honor, but in profit and efficiency.